you want to use the thoughts, ideas, and concepts from someone else. How do you do that without plagiarizing? Your professor has asked you, let's say, to do an essay on a topic that you don't know a whole lot about. It's likely that the professor knows you don't know a whole lot about the topic, and probably the class itself in general may not have a big knowledge base on the topic. But as professors, we want you to challenge yourself and to learn and grow. We want you to go and get that wisdom. Okay, so we know you're going to get that knowledge from somewhere. We want you to go to a good source from someone that has the wisdom in that topic and to learn from them. But you don't want to plagiarize, right? You don't ever want to pass knowledge off as if it came from your brain if it didn't. Okay, so we always want to give credit to the source. So if you don't want to use someone else's words, or you don't want to use their words along with their thoughts and ideas and concepts, maybe you have an assignment that tells you that you cannot use any other words other than your own, right? So I do this a lot with my students, or maybe you're writing a summary, right? We know that the basic premise behind a summary is that everything must be in your own words. Okay, so how do you avoid using quotation marks or someone else's words? And by avoiding quotation marks, I am of course not saying to copy and paste verbatim and just not put quotation marks around it, because we know that's plagiarism, and we're here to learn how to avoid plagiarism. But if you need to get your wisdom from somewhere else, your information, your data, your statistics, examples from somewhere else that is not in your brain at the moment you begin your research, how do you do it? Okay, a lot of this is going to be similar to what was in the last video, but there'll be a couple new things, and it's kind of taking a different approach. So before, we were talking about ways to avoid plagiarism, and this one is just more of, if you only want to get someone's words, thoughts, and ideas, and you want to put them, now you want to reframe it into your own words, thoughts, and ideas, so that someone behind you could come and use you as a source. They could cite and reference your work, right? It is completely, genuinely your own. Every word is your own. Every thought, idea, and concept has been processed and generated, is now yours. Okay? How do you do that? Well, there's at least, for me, I would say there's 6 steps. Okay, so I'm going to share those 6 steps with you. Step number 1 is going to be read all of the relevant material in every source. Read all of the relevant material in one source. So if it's one article about the Bill of Rights and it's a 2-page article, read the entire 2-page article, right? If all of it is applicable. However, if you just want the 10th Amendment because you want to learn how the Constitution is applicable to the states, and only one paragraph of that article talks about the 10th Amendment and everything else talks about the 1st through the 9th and the 11th and the 12th Amendment, it may not be relevant to read the whole thing. So in that case, maybe not, but you want to read everything relevant. Read everything relevant, again, because you want to be able to write from your own mind, from your own memory, okay? Or you want to take notes and have the notes be completely, genuinely your own. So read all relevant parts of whatever that source is, okay? And we're just going to do one source at a time. We're not going to source hop, okay? And just go from source to source and just pick out one sentence here, one sentence here. You're gonna take one source at a time, and you're going to read all relevant parts of the source, okay? Step number 2 is, as you're reading the source, you're going to do a chunk, read a chunk, and you're going to flip over the source or put it aside, and you're going to be taking notes as you read without looking at the original source. So you're gonna read a section, maybe it's a large paragraph or half a page or whatever chunk of information you'd like to break that source down into. You're going to read it. You're going to not look at the source, and you're going to, now having processed the material, now gaining that wisdom, you're going to make notes on what you just read. They will be in your own words. They will be from your own mind. Okay, so you want to take notes as you read. If you don't, by the time you get all the way done, especially if it's a larger passage or 5, 6, 7 pages or more, by the time you get all the way done, you're going to go back to the beginning and you're going to start again, but this time you're going to start highlighting and underlining and starring things, and one way or another, you're going to end up accidentally doing one of the 6 ways to plagiarize, right? Because you're going back to the original source. By the time you finish reading, you should not need to go back to the original source, okay? You shouldn't, to the actual text, right? The meat and potatoes of the original source, you won't need to go back to it, okay? You will need to go back to it to get our 3 elements if you need them: the quote, the cite, and the reference. At a minimum, you will always cite and reference. If you go to Google and even if you look up one sentence, you will at a minimum do a cite and a reference. If you're using any actual language or any words of that author or anything verbatim, you will also need to do a quote. Okay, so at a minimum, cite, reference, cite, reference. If it doesn't come from your brain and you have to look up anything else, at a minimum, cite and reference. Okay, so step 1, read all relevant parts of your source. Read all relevant parts of your source. Number 2 is you're going to take almost like a summary note, right? So you're not trying to remember every single little detail and putting every single detail from your mind onto your paper, right? You're just kind of jotting down kind of summary or conclusory notes on the important parts that you're like, oh, this is like a gold nugget for me to use in my paper, right? That's what you want. Number 3 is you do not go back to the original source, okay? You do not go back to the original source, the actual text of it. You do not go back, okay? From that point on, once you make your notes, you're done with your notes, the only thing you go back to is your notes, okay? Again, because you made them without looking at the original source, there is no way to plagiarize, okay? Well, it'd be very hard. Never want to say never, but it would be really hard to plagiarize if you're not looking at the material, if you flipped it upside down. Unless you just memorized a particular passage and you're like, oh, that's great. And then you accidentally or intentionally write it down in your own words, but you don't quote it. So again, you have to, quote, cite, reference, okay? So that's number 3 is do not go back to the original source. Number 4 is going to be add your notes to the outline, okay? You need to be writing using outline. Okay, if you don't, there's really no way to properly organize all your different sources and how you want to rearrange them. And what I find when I catch students plagiarizing or cheating in some other way, it's because their paper will be like sentence by sentence according to the structure of whatever source they read. And it will literally follow sentence by sentence. It's not their own organization. It won't make sense. It's never good. It's never good. Those are terrible papers. Those are papers that score very poorly. Even if we weren't considering plagiarism, which is an automatic 0, right? You're going to get an F if you're caught plagiarizing, intentionally or unintentionally. But the paper itself, even if we set the plagiarism aside, the paper itself is not going to be good, right? So you want to work from an outline. Not only that, but it will keep you from copying and pasting, right? Which again, we never want to copy and paste, but it will keep you from doing it on the paper that you'll be submitting, right? If you're making your own handwritten notes without looking at the original source and then transferring your handwritten notes to the applicable part of your outline, it's really like the more steps you take to get you away from the original source, the harder and harder it is to plagiarize. Okay, so number 4 is to add your handwritten notes to your outline. If you're not using an outline, you should be using an outline, okay? Use an outline. That naturally leads us to number 5, which is to write from your outline. So in the last couple of videos, I mentioned that if you find that you need to start copying and pasting or cheating or plagiarizing or stealing someone else's words or their thoughts, ideas, and concepts, it's because you don't know the material. Again, if you're writing too early, if you have a research paper or an essay, so you sit down, you Google a couple sources, and then you pull up each source and you're copying and pasting or in some way you're just kind of transferring the information from one source to your paper. you're skipping a whole bunch of steps. So you're just not ready to actually be writing, right? Once you've completely gone through all relevant parts of every source. So remember our step number one was to read the relevant portion of the source. But you want to do that for every source, okay? And you don't want to stop until you feel like you fully understand the subject enough to be able to have a full conversation about it or a debate. If you could sit down with your professor and have a intelligent debate or discussion about that topic and not want to look like an idiot, like you're ready to do it and you're going to do really well and you're going to think like, oh, my professor's going to think I'm such a genius, and I'm so brilliant and I'm going to be the smartest student they've ever had. If you feel like that, you're ready to write. Okay, so step one, read all relevant parts of the source, go to the next source, find your next source, and read all relevant portions of that source. And again, you're taking notes, right? So you're doing all the steps. When you get to your outline and you transfer your handwritten notes onto your outline, and I apologize if the beginning was a little confusing. So you get to that step where you transfer your notes onto the outline. Now you're ready to go up to the next source and start those steps again. Okay, so steps 1 through 4. So step 1, read all relevant parts of the source, right? So take your own summary notes or conclusory notes on a separate piece of paper without looking at your original source. Don't go back to the original source and then add your notes to the outline. So do all of those 4 things, check them all off. Once you have done that, you're now ready to go on to the next source. And you go through that 4-item checklist again with the next source. And you do that until you no longer need to do any research. And you can confidently say, I know everything there is to know about this subject. I am a pro on the 10th Amendment or whatever it is that your topic is. You're ready to go. Okay, so by now you should have your outline filled out because you've been transferring your handwritten notes in step 4 to your outline. Once your outline is filled out and you are ready to start writing, now you're ready. You have all the information. It's going to be nearly impossible to plagiarize. You've done an amazing job. You're ready to go. Now, you have your outline. It's completely filled in. You're going to write your essay or your report or whatever it is that you're working on from your outline. You are not going to go back to your original source, right? Just write it from your outline. Write it from your outline. And remember that your outline should contain your quote, your cite, and your reference material. Okay, or you can have a separate reference page. Just make sure that you're actually adding everything over and just don't forget. I like to put everything onto my outline and then transfer it separately to a separate reference page, but I like everything to be all together so that I don't actually accidentally forget anything. Okay, so step 5 that I suggest to avoid plagiarism and to use your own thoughts and concepts and ideas. Step 5 is write from your outline. The final and 6th step is to, as I just mentioned, include the citation and the reference and any kind of quotation material that you want to use in your outline. Okay, so put it all in your outline when you do that, and then as you write, you'll just be transferring it over. Okay, so those are my 6 suggestions, the 6 steps I would use in how to write your paper, essay, your homework, whatever it is that you're submitting, how to put everything in your own thoughts, ideas, and concepts, right, without plagiarizing. You don't want to plagiarize. And I know I've said it several times, but when you hear about people saying, just put it in your own words, again, what students do is they swap words out, or they drop words, or they do one of the 5 different ways to plagiarize from the list of 6, trying to put it in their own words, but it doesn't make it your own words if you're swapping things out. Okay, so this, if you follow these 6 steps, it will not only be your own words, but it'll be your own thoughts, ideas, and concepts, right? That come from the thoughts, ideas, and concepts of someone else. So you can use this if your professor told you to not use quotations, or they don't want you to quote things. They want everything to be in your own language. They don't want you to use quotation marks. This restriction is put in a lot of times when there's been a lot of cheating in the class. Pretty much all of my classes at this point in the semester, I do not allow quotations now because there's been so much copying and pasting that students have lost the privilege to use quotations. So no more quotations, which means that everything needs to be 100% in your own words. So if your professor has told you not to use anyone else's words, when things start coming back on the plagiarism checker and your paper gets flagged for plagiarism because you have someone else's words, that's really bad, right? So when you're told to put it in your own words, again, this is just to really stress, put it in your own words means it needs to come from your brain. It needs to come from your mind, from your memory, genuinely, completely, 100% your own, right? You know it well enough that you could teach the subject to someone else. It's yours. Okay, so that's what it means to put things in your own words. Again, it doesn't mean to copy and paste verbatim and then to drop words, switch words, swap words, change the order, jumble the order. It doesn't mean any of those. It means to fully read, fully process, do all the 5 steps above, and then it will be in your own words. Okay, so really, really great job. I know this is a very long conglomeration of videos for plagiarism and how to avoid it, but you really are doing a fantastic job.